Into the fourth center, we can see that one more power, what is called as higher centers of brain. So these higher centers of the brain are connected by the cortex area, which is being run by various emotions, various sense organic senses, and various different stimulations given by a PNS system. So one over here, it is being indicated by E over there, what is called emotions. So if you see a very people or the small children or anyone started weeping, a lot of weeping, lot of crying, so we can say that they are being taken into a situation called vomiting. So once sometimes the laugh, what we have been doing, a lot of laugh, that means to the minutes, how we are going on having some laugh, definitely that person will have an inducing of vomiting. So these are called as emotions, where we are trying to induce the power of vomiting or the power of nauseating and giving a word called emetics, which has been evolved out from our stomach. And why this is called as higher center of the brain. And now it is indicated by another word called P. So what is P? So whenever we have a pain, whenever we have some injury of the body, whenever we have some inflammation of the body, so we are not able to bear it up, we are not able to control the power of pain, we are not able to control the power of inflammation. So what happens? This is definitely will give you inducing power of emitting. So that means we are trying to evolve, or we are trying to pump out the waste material from the gastrointestinal cavity, driven out and taken up by the center called higher centers of the brain. And now we'll go to the next one, which is called as S. And what is S stands for? S stands for the sight, or the seeing. So if we can understand that, why the sight is being giving you some inducing of vomiting. So there is a power of sight also to induce the power of emitting. Why? If you see some blood, sometimes whenever we see some horrible situations, whenever we see some blood flowing, whenever we see a lot of accidents, whenever we see terrible tragedy situations, so whenever we see, we have some stimulatory power into our centers of the brain. So that is called sight. So if it was sometimes, if you have a surgery going on onto a theater, and whenever this surgery is going on in a theater, what happens? When we see it in our own eyes, we are not able to control our fear, we are not able to control our emotion. So immediately we feel like vomiting there itself. And this S stands for S. Now we can see that other one S called there. What is it? This is nothing but the smell. So when we see some unwanted situations, unwanted colors, unwanted food, unwanted chemicals, unwanted situations, so whenever we smell up all those, whenever we take the power of chemicals or the power of I can give you one example. When you're passing to a chemical industry, so what happens? The smell which is being driven out from the industry, you're not able to take up by the smell, and that smell gives you the inducing of vomiting. So what happens whenever this type of situations happens from the higher centers of the brain, just like emotions, pain, inflammation, sight and smell. So these are all the situations which are giving you the power of emetics, and that is driven down by the vagus sensory nerves, which from the various centers, from the stomach, from your respiratory system, from your eye system, that means nothing but your sight, from the ears, that means the sensation, the sense organs is also giving a power of driving out the lot of vomiting in the form of emetics. So these are the various stimulatory situations where we can see the power of getting out the unwanted substances. And here now we'll see what is the physiology of vomiting and how it happens. So if you confront with a lot of 4 areas, that means the 4 to 5 stimulatory areas, whenever it is able to giving you that power of stimulation, we have a physiology of vomiting. So how it happens? First and foremost, whenever it is being taken up by the brain, by your vagus sensory nerves, that it has to emit it out, immediately your esophageal nerves, esophageal muscles which are being present onto the esophageal, they are just relaxed. Whenever they get relaxed, the wide pipe, that means the pipe which has been getting out the food has been widened to driven out the food, whatever it is being given from the stomach. So the first step what we can see is that the esophageal muscles are just relaxed. And next, the diaphragm, which is been pumping out, or the giving the pressure of the stomach, it is been pressed up. That means the diaphragm, which is pressed up, is being onto the given support to the stomach and is being given down. I've written over here. And whenever this is being written by the diaphragm and or they've been pushed up by the diaphragm, almost you have a contractions of your abdominal muscles. And whenever we have a contraction of the abdominal muscles, it is giving you a lot of pressure onto the abdominal muscles to drive it out or to push up the food from the stomach and getting into the esophagus. Now we'll see the third point. Whenever this is being happened, this is happening with intra-abdominal pressures. That means the intra-abdominal pressures is much more increased. Like in the second point, I was telling you about the abdominal contractions, and this has been upgraded. That means it is giving a support of intra-abdominal pressure, which is being much more pressurized, giving you the pressure of the food to come out. It is not only in the form of food, but it is also in the form of mucus. It is also in the form of chemical driven out. It is also in the form of sweat. It is also not in the form of all the salivary. Actually, we can say it's salivary, not the sweat one. So salivary, the salivary which can be taken out. And the fun one is, whenever this is all happened, the food comes out from your stomach into the esophagus, immediately the epiglottis closed up. So whenever this is epiglottis is closed up, we can understand that the air cannot enter to the epiglottis, so that the respiratory tract is not disturbed. And whenever this, if you see, sometimes whenever the vomiting happens, if the epiglottis is also happened, sometimes it enters through the nose, isn't it? So this, as I said before, the vomiting is always done either through the mouth or either through the nose. So whenever this epiglottis is not able to close up clearly, or it is semi open, the glottis is being taken up the food through the nose also. And it is also confronted by another supportive, what is called, it is increasing your heart rate. As I said before, it is increasing your salivation, it is increasing your peristaltic movements. So we know that the peristaltic movements are nothing but the movements of your stomach or the movements of the intestine to make up the bowel movement, so isn't it? So whenever these are all the situation happens, that means the physiology of vomiting will happens in 4 to 5 steps. The first step is relaxation of the esophagus. The second step is contraction of the abdominal muscles. The third step is intra-abdominal muscles are more pressurized. The fourth step is it is increasing your heart rate, it is increasing your salivation, it is increasing your peristaltic movements. And also we can see that the epiglottis immediately closes, so that the air cannot be enters into the white pipe. So we know that there is a similar pathway or the same pathway between your respiratory tract and to the digestive tract by a word called epiglottis. It is a cap-like structure which is opening from your respiratory tract and your digestive tract. So the epiglottis is completely closes, so that the food what is being evolved from the esophagus cannot be taken inside our body once again. So this word is being given by a word called epiglottis closes. So we can understand that the food just now, because of all this physiology, the food enters into the esophagus to the tip and through the glottis, it comes out in the mouth, or it comes out through the mouth. So we can say that this physiology of the vomiting is being done with the 4 to 5 steps. Now we'll go to the drugs what we can use. So as I told you before, antiemetics are the pharmacological agents or the pharmacological drugs which are used to control the emetics. That means the controlling the various steps involved into the vomiting and the controlling the flater of receptors which are being stimulated. That means they are working against them. So we can call them as antagonists. So the antiemetics are the pharmacological agents which are able to inhibit various receptors which are present onto the various 4 to 5 points, so that they can be controlled. Now we'll see the first one. As we saw that the first step is called CTZ center, which is driven up by 3 receptors. The first receptor is muscarinic. So we can use or we can block the muscarinic receptors. How? By a word called anti-muscarinic agents. So here the drugs what we can use are chlorpropamide and metochlorpropamide. So these 2 drugs are very important to close up the muscarinic receptors. That means they are called as anticholinergics. Now the second one, which is called as dopamine. So we can call them as dopamine antagonists. Whenever we see that antagonist, we can understand that they are acting against your psyche. They are acting against your psychology of the brain. So we can say they are against your mind. So we know that there are a lot of drugs related to dopamines. So they are called as antipsychotics. The best examples are scopolamine and scopolamine. So this is a center which is called as dopamine antagonist and muscarinic agonist. Now the left one is NK1. So the NK1 is nothing but the receptor closing called as NK1 antagonist. So I hit it in here. They are called elpiprotant or roliprotant. So these two drugs which are helpful for the closing of NK1 receptor. So we can use a lot of combination of the drugs. That means the usage of anticholinergics, the usage of antipsychotics, a usage of neurokinic receptors. So we can use a combination of these three drugs so that it can be taken up, or we can inhibit the controlling of your CTZ center. And here we can call it as chemo, what we can say induced vomiting. So we can call it as CIV. So chemo induced vomiting is being controlled by three various receptors. One is muscarinic, other one is dopamine, and other one is NK1. Now we'll jump to the ventricular nuclei. Such ventricular nuclei, as I told you before, it is worked by three receptors. The one receptor is called as H1, nothing but your autocaudal receptor, which is called histamine. So we can use probably antihistamines. One is our cetirizine, we can go sinazine, cimetidine, ranitidine. So all these are all different drugs which are drug used for the antihistamines. Now coming to the jumping of your M receptor, as usual we can understand that the M receptor can be closed up by the anticholinergics, nothing but your chlorpropamine and metachloropropamine. And now coming to the center called as NK1, as I told you before, it can be controlled by the elpitrudant or the roliprant. So these two drugs which are being used as a NK1 receptor are adjoining with the other ones. It cannot be used singly, but it can be enjoyed, or it can be used as combination of the two drugs. So if you see some drugs available in the market, it is being combined by the cimetidine, ranitidine with aldosterone. So these are two various drugs. That means we have to combine one on the other one so that the power of emitting can be induced or inhibited little faster. So this is coming to the ventricular nuclei. Now we'll coming to the third jump, what is called as lumen of your stomach or the lumen of your intestine, where it is being done with your serotonin and substance P. And this serotonin which is being released from the enterochromaffin cells are nothing but 5-HT3. Now we know that now we have to call that receptor as 5-HT3 antagonist, nothing but anti-serotonin drugs or anti-5-HT3 drugs. So we can list various drugs which are released into the 5-HT3. What are they? They are nothing but your odensterone or reninsterone. So these are different types of drugs which are present in the center of stomach, where it is being controlling the power of serotonin and the power of substance P by the various receptors which are being controlled or antagonized by them, so that the vagus sensory nerve cannot be stimulated, taking the path towards your CTZ center. So particularly when you have to start with your serotonin, we can understand that it is not only working with the serotonin, but it is also working with your muscarinic, it is also working with your dopamine, it is also working with NK1. So NK1, as I told you, elpitrudant and roliprant. So a combination of aldosterone and the roliprant can be used so that this being heavily stimulated so that the vomiting can be inhibited. So the drugs are being multiplied. So the combination of the drugs are being multiplied. Coming to the centers of CTZ, so that means they're coming to the centers of high centers, that means highly inducer. So this is a preliminary treatment, this is a preventive treatment. So whenever we have some situations like this, we can understand that those situations has to be prevented, or before we have to take some care so that all the emotions can be controlled and all the particular pain, allergies or this inflammations and the side seeing. We know that there is some fault with our sight, with our blood. So we have to control the seeing of sight of the blood. Or we know that the smell of something cannot be taken up by us. So what we need to do? We need to control with a lot of mask so that the smell cannot be taken in. So these are the preventive methods so that the higher centers of the brain cannot be stimulated by these particular situations so that it can be controlled. And so here, now one more situation here, what is called as vertigo. Vertigo is mean that it has been giving you a lot of side effects whenever we have been using a lot of drugs. That means we can use odesterone, we can use rolipride, you can use elpidurine, you can use scopolamine, metoclopramide, chlorpromazine. These are the various drugs which can be controlled or which can be used for the control of your emetic center. So here we can giving you that it is controlling your CIV, nothing but the chemo induced vomiting. Next, post-operative vomiting. Next, you have a vertigo vomiting and also some renal vomiting. So this is all the different types of vomitings which can be inducing your vomiting so that they can be controlled and given you by various techniques so that the emetic situation cannot be taken by that and it is being controlled by a word called anti-emetics. So this is the end of your anti-emetics so that we can clear up the whole situation by a single diagram. So thank you for supporting me. Bye.